of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Both of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Both of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Or we can get gully, I'll size up your body and put some white chalk around it.
Welcome to the Single Dads of the Midwest, episode 13. I'm joined by the spectacular Sonia to talk about dancing and her career as a professional dancer. Me and her know each other from Mind Food SF, which is a really cool meetup where we talk about podcasts and TED Talk and stuff, and I'll post the link so you can check that out. But yeah, Sonia, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me on. I'm Sonia, and I'm a former professional competitive ballroom dancer. And I'm happy to chat.
Nice. So how did you get into ballroom dancing or just dancing in general?
So when I was a kid, my mom tried to put me in every possible extracurricular activity. So I did a little bit of tennis and swimming, and of course I went to math school. For those of you who don't know, I'm Russian, and so I was born in Russia, and so I grew up in the States, but I came with a very Russian background, and so my parents, really tried to push me to do everything I possibly could. And so one of the things, so I had been in like some ballet and jazz and tap classes when I was a kid, and then when I was 14, my mom signed me up for a salsa class, just like everything else. And I overnight just fell in love with it. And I knew immediately from that day that that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so that's kind of how it all started.
That's awesome. And how did you make the transition from like, all right, this is like a really cool thing to like sticking with it to the point where you became a professional?
Yeah, so when I was 14, I started the salsa classes and I kind of jumped in with both feet. I started dancing every day and I started sort of assistant teaching pretty close after that. And then I started competing sort of on an amateur level when I was 16. And then when I was applying to colleges, as a senior in high school, I really looked for a college that either had a dance team or was really close to my dance studio. So I knew at that point that it was really important to me. My mom, of course, had said things like, "Oh, you should major in something that's more lucrative or more stable than dancing." So she really pushed me to have a more stable career, and so I went to school for international business and computer science at a school just outside Boston. And it also happened to be down the street from the studio that I was dancing at the time. And so I tried really hard to not be a dancer. I went to business school, I hated it. But then afterwards, I decided, I have this degree, I'm going to move to Belgium because I really wanted to work in an international environment, and the EU is located in Brussels. So I decided I'm going to go to Belgium. I'm going to get a job, and I did. I worked in public policy for about a year, and then I came back to the US, and I took a job in public relations, and I hated it. And I would spend 8 hours a day at the office in a little cubicle, making calls. And all I really wanted was to just be in the studio. And I remember every day waiting till 5 o'clock came so that I could run to the studio.
So it was calling for you, and then you came back, and then what happened after that?
And then, so at the time, so then I quit my job because I really hated it. And I tried to spend the next year or so trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Because I really didn't like the work that I had been doing, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. Anyway, I eventually ran out of money and I really needed a job. And so the only thing I really wanted that I could fall back on was dancing. So I walked into a dance studio. I was living in New Jersey at the time. And I walked into a dance studio and I said, I have 10 years of dance experience under my belt. I have a job. And she said, sure, your first class is tonight. And so I just, again, jumped in with both feet. And at that point, I had actually already applied to grad school. I'd gotten in for a master's of social work at Rutgers University, and I paid my housing deposit. I got an internship at that point. And then I just sort of realized that I really, really loved dancing, and I could always go back to grad school, and I couldn't always dance. Um, and so I rescinded my application for grad school, and that was the moment that I really committed to being a professional competitive ballroom dancer.
Dang. And so that entailed both, I would imagine, teaching classes, but then also training yourself to compete in competitions?
Exactly. So the way that most dancers make their money is by either teaching, but also competing with their students. So there's a category of competition called pro-am, which means that one person in the couple is a professional and the other person is an amateur. So that in that way, the student pays money to the teacher to take the lessons, but also to go to the competition to dance with them, and that's really where the money is. And so that's part of what I did. But actually, I really wanted to focus on my own dancing. So I didn't teach a ton because I wanted to save my body and my energy for my own dancing. And so the way that I made my money was because I had this business degree, I was the manager of dance studios. So I did sort of the day-to-day managing of the dance studio. And then on top of that, yeah, I took my own classes. I competed with my own partner. I trained outside of my work hours to really, yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear about the competitive side of things.
Yeah.
So, like, what does that look like for a professional dancer? What does the training look like? What's the competition schedule?
Yeah. So you could basically compete every weekend across the country. Um, and the the competition schedule it's generally year round, but there are more competitions during the school year. Um, there's also a huge collegiate circuit on the East Coast, so there's a ton of colleges that have dance teams that compete against each other. Um, so the day in the life of a dancer is I get up at maybe 7 a.m., maybe 8 or so, and then I go to train with my partner, and we train for about 2 to 3 hours. And what that means is we're running through routines, making sure that not only that we remember the routines, but also that we're technically correct in all of our steps. That like each step has its correct angle of rotation and correct foot placement and correct body placement. And then, of course, we're working on things like theatricality, emotionality, on top of technique. And we compete in the style that I dance. I competed in 5 separate dances, and so we had 5 routines. And yes, they're always the same routine. I always get that question. We never know what the music is going to be, but we do know what the routine is. So we practice that routine, and then I go to the gym after practice, and then it's time to go to work. So at 1 o'clock, or noon or 1 o'clock, I go to the studio, and then I work a full 8-hour day, and then I get out of work at 9 or 10 or so. And then I have to like do my regular person stuff, like go to the grocery store. So it's really important to live by a 24-hour grocery store so that you can go at 11 o'clock at night. And then you're home and hopefully in bed by midnight.
Damn,
Do it
that
over
sounds
again.
pretty exhausting.
Oh yeah, and then so that's just Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, you're on a plane or in the car going to these competitions. Um, and it's usually a day trip. I mean, depending obviously on how far the competition is, but you're trying to always save money, because as a struggling artist, you never have enough money, right? So you're always sleeping on somebody's couches or driving. We very routinely drove from Boston to New York or New Jersey, did a competition or did some lessons, and then drove back all in the same day. So it takes a lot of effort, just emotional effort and just effort to be awake for all of that, and be 100% on your game to be competing, and then also like eating right and making sure that anyway. So
Dang. Wow.
yeah, it's a lot.
Wait, so did you do just salsa competitions or varieties of salsa or like other types of dancing as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So gets into sort of how ballroom dancing works. So salsa is actually that was the gateway dance for me. But I don't actually compete in salsa. So I danced in so under the ballroom dancing circuit or like umbrella, there's two major styles. There's ballroom, which is the waltz, tango, foxtrot, Viennese waltz, and quick step. So those are the dances that move around the room, the ones that you see with the long flowy dresses. They usually go in circles. And then there's the Latin dancing, which is what I did, and those are the 5 dances are cha-cha, rumba, samba, paso doble, and jive. And those are like the skimpy dresses, and they move much less. So salsa is not one of them. So yeah, and then there's the international style and there's the American style of both of those things that I just talked about. And I competed in the international Latin section.
Got it. And is it like each competition is its own island, or is there like a kind of like a in like sports where there's like points or something, and then there's like a playoffs or something, or like a bigger competition?
Yes. So there are 2 federations, just like in the NFL, right? I don't know anything about football, so, but there are 2 leagues, I guess you'd call them. And generally you belong to one federation or the other, but not both. There's no such thing as like a playoff. Each competition has heat, right? So if you have, let's say, 20 couples, in the first heat, or rather the first round, the next round will cut it down to 12 couples, and then the final will be 6 couples, and then you get ranked from 1 through 6. There are, nationals, for example, that will have about 400 couples per event, so that's a lot. And then there's also a competition called the Blackpool Dance Sport Competition, which is in Blackpool, England, and that's considered like the Olympics of dancing, like the biggest competition in the world.
Did you ever compete there?
So my partner and I split before we really got there, but we had plans to go. But that's one thing I sort of regret I never got to do.
Oh, dang. Well, maybe it's not too late to find some way to make it there. At least.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm retired now. I don't.
It's that one competition where you come out of retirement for just that one competition. You're still fairly young. I was gonna ask too. Like, is it like you have the same partner and like with all these routines, or did you have to like transition over the years?
Yeah. So just like any relationship, there are ebbs and flows in a partnership, and sometimes you're just better off with different partners. So they do, and also people move and they change. Their priorities change, and so partners don't last forever, unfortunately. But you do sort of have a leg up the longer you are with somebody, because if you keep changing partners every year, so you have to start from scratch, right? You have to develop a connection with your partner. You have to develop new routines with your partner. You have to get a new coach, or your coach has to learn the new partnership. So it's like having to start all over again from scratch. So if the longer you are with your partner, the more trust and communication and sort of foundation you have with them. So it's better to stay with your partner. But as they say, they always say that it's harder to find a dance partner than it is to find a husband. So
really, I've never heard that, but I can definitely see like. I mean, you could tell anyone that's done dancing knows like how in sync two people have to be. The style of dancing I've done is like swing, where it's actually much more free form. There's less like, well, there are like routines in swing, but it's more like you make it up on the spot. Are there any competition? I would imagine there's some ballroom competitions like that, right, where it's more free form, or is it all routine?
No, ballroom is notoriously very rigid. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I just wanted to expand a little bit more on the finding a partner thing, and because people always ask me, what's the process in finding a partner? And there are like Facebook groups where partner searches somebody made an app. So it's like kind of like dating, but there
It
are
sounds
a
like a
lot of
roommate. It sounds like a
yeah.
roommate search. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that have to sync up, right? So not only does the level of the partner have to sync up, and sometimes actually that's less important than some other things because people can learn and they can grow. But other things that you have to look physically that you match, right? So he generally, so okay, the caveat here is that ballroom is a very heteronormative sport. So generally, although it's getting better these days, but generally speaking, you have the male who's the leader and the female who's the follower, and he's taller and she's shorter. But they have to physically match up, right? So you generally don't have somebody who's like really short and thin, let's say, with somebody who's like abnormally tall and maybe has some extra pounds. So you have to match up sort of similarly. You also have to have the same goals, right? So if I want to be national champion and my partner wants to do social dancing on the weekends, that's not a match. You have to have the similar ideas of how much you want to train, how much money you want to spend, right? That's a big one, right? How much money do I want to spend on not only coaching and lessons, but also traveling and competing, because that's also expensive. And, how much do I feel like I want to invest in my own dancing? How much do I want to invest in the clothes and the dresses and the hair and makeup and tanning and all of that stuff? So that's why we say it's harder to find a dance partner than.
Yeah, that does seem like a lot of things that have to line up. Seems like a tough search. When you were doing it, what was your goal? Like, was your goal like, I want to be the very best, or was it more like something else?
No, my partner, I found somebody who he wanted to be the top dancer in the country, 100%. That was the goal. And I was like, oh yeah, it'd be nice to get there. But I really love performing, and that's really what drove me. And I just really liked being on stage. So I worked really hard and I constantly wanted to get better, but I didn't have to be first all the time. And I kind of say that because, well, it might be easy for me to say that now because we did very well together. And so we were at least in the top 6 for many of the competitions. So it's easier for me to say like, oh, I didn't care, but I didn't feel like I had to be number 1 all the time.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, goal syncing does make a lot of sense in terms of partner search. So okay, so you're dancing, you're competing all the weekends. I'm curious, what's the craziest, I guess, that you feel comfortable sharing? What's the craziest story that you had at like a competition or just in dance in general?
I mean, this did not happen to me and I didn't see it, but but I heard that one studio owner punched another studio
Oh
owner for
wow.
taking students.
Wow. It's competitive out
So the
there.
competition is very, very fierce. And that's, I mean, yeah, the fight over students is real. Because that's where the money is. So yeah, that's for sure. I would not have wanted to be in that room when that happened.
Yeah, that sounds pretty intense. One thing I was just thinking about was like in terms of the actual competitions themselves and judging, obviously there's like a level of subjectivity. So like what do they judge on? And did you ever feel like any of the decisions were like kind of biased? Maybe not even against you, but maybe some other the other competitors?
Absolutely. So it's very subjective, and there are no um, rules about how you judge something. It's just like, is X couples dancing better than another partner or another couple? And it's unclear what better means. Yes, I mean, in general, you're looking at things like technique. So if the knee is supposed to be straight, is it straight? Are they performing well? Do they seem connected? Does it seem like the leader is leading and the follower is following? Do they have good what's called floor craft. Floor craft is like how you move around the room. Are you bumping into other couples? So things like that. But it is absolutely very subjective. And then to your second point is, do I think it's sometimes unfair? So there's this. So the judges are also coaches, which means that if you take lessons with some of the coaches slash judges, there's always, who knows what that does, right? Like if I'm spending $300 a week taking lessons with this judge that I know is going to be at the competition next week, it may not help, but it certainly probably won't hurt. So there's always been some talk around that, and also, but then the judges of course always say I'm never biased, and there's somebody always says, well, if your dancing is better than everybody else's, they can't deny it, and so ultimately you can only better your own dancing and make sure that you're dancing to the best of your ability. But when everybody's pretty fucking good, like, yes, so it's very subjective for sure.
Got it. And I'm guessing that it's somewhat insular community in the sense that you're like seeing the same judges and same competitors like at all these competitions.
Absolutely. Yeah. It does differ a little bit if you go like to a different region. So a lot of the judges who live or work in New York will also come to judge competitions in Boston, for example, and vice versa. But if I come out to California for a competition, I'm probably going to see different people, different judges, just because it's easier to get local judges to judge a competition.
That makes sense. Did you ever have like a rival? Like, since there's like the pool is probably pretty similar, like, did you ever have like, oh, this like one pair I need to beat?
Yes. I personally didn't. My partner really was very competitive in that sense, and yes, there was one couple. They're like, "Oh, we have to beat them," and sometimes we did, and sometimes we didn't. But I think it was more, for me at least, it was much more in a healthy competition kind of way. Like there was never any like physical violence between us. Like there was never any. I mean, there were some snide comments here and there, but to me, it felt always sort of a healthy competition. Although for some people, it was like really serious.
Dang, nice. I feel like rivals might make it a little bit fun, but it could probably get very competitive, like you said, with your partner.
Yeah, like sometimes, actually, I remember once it was a pretty big competition, and we did not do very well that day. And this girl, she's younger than me, and we would always go back and forth. Sometimes they would win, sometimes we would win, and she made it and we didn't, and she just walked by and she was like, next time. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, so like things like that, now I just sort of laugh about it, but at the time I was pissed.
Jeez, that's not. Yeah, I would want to definitely beat them the next time I saw them. All right, so you're in full swing, you're competing, and then like what happens? Like, is it just a matter of like, given the high physical demanding nature of the activity, just like with age, having to retire, or you just not feeling it anymore?
Yeah, I mean that was definitely a big thing. So a couple of things happened. One is that I was getting tired, right? I was 29 and I was getting tired of constantly traveling and constantly, working my body 12 hours a day, every day, um, running around all the time. And so for a long time, dancing was my number one goal, and everything that I did in my life was to better that goal. And so that was one bucket. And in the other bucket, I had all of these other priorities, things like saving for retirement or hanging out with my friends or dating or, a number of other things. And I was sort of ignoring them for a long time because dancing was so important to me. And it was worth it. And then one day I just sort of woke up and I thought to myself, like, I'm getting older and I this dancing thing just isn't the scales had sort of tipped for me, and this dancing thing just isn't as important to me as honestly saving for retirement was the big one. And because I was always in the studio, I didn't I mean, I had friends with the people that I worked with, but it was like work and friends all in one, right? I didn't have a place where I wasn't working all the time. And that was also really important to me. And so I just decided kind of overnight that I wanted to put effort into these other priorities that I had been ignoring for the last 10 years. So that was a big thing. And also, yeah, that sort of coupled in with the fact that my body was getting tired. And then also, unsurprisingly, there's a lot of drama in the dance industry. Like you just mentioned, the sort of petty comments and it's a very insular community. Everybody knows each other. There's a lot of, oh, this person is sleeping with that person, but they're dating somebody else and they're dancing with a third person. There's a lot of that. And I just got tired of it. And so I retired. Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah, but it seems like you reinvented yourself and you're doing a lot of other cool things now. So you were able to kind of forge this new identity from dancer to all the different things that Sonia is and does now.
Yeah. So once I retired, I hung up my dance shoes and I thought to myself that it would take a very long time for me to get back to dancing. And that's true. So I've been out of dancing for now 3 years or so. Actually, it's exactly 3 years in March. And I honestly don't really miss it, which is surprising because I thought I would. But I go dancing these days to meet people more than I do to actually dance. Um, Although one thing that is interesting to me these days is learning other kinds of dance. So learning things like West Coast swing or salsa rueda, which I haven't really done before, or zouk. Right, so other kinds of partner dancing that aren't as competitive, that aren't as strict, that I can still be creative, but not have it be at such an intense level. And who knows, maybe I'll compete once again. I have a dream. I have a dream of competing in a different. So, like I mentioned, I used to dance Latin, but I really want to do the American smooth style, which is the one with the long flowy dresses and it moves around the room. And there's one dance in particular that I want to do. It's the Viennese waltz, the one that everybody thinks about when they think about waltz. And
I've tried waltzing a couple times. It's so like hard, but it is fun.
um, yeah, there's two kinds of waltz. There's slow waltz and there's the Viennese waltz, right? And when people think about waltz, they generally think about the Viennese waltz, which is like fast turning around. It's
Yes.
very, very difficult, but I love the music and I'm guessing it's fun to so many people do it. So that's my dream is like maybe one day I'll get in that after pandemic when we can
Nice.
be in the same room with each other and take our masks off. Yeah.
I think that's definitely doable at some point. I would love to see come cheer you on when you eventually do compete.
Yeah.
I guess one question I had is, what advice would you give for, I guess, two different pieces of advice. One for just people looking to just learn dancing in general, and then two for people like maybe wanting to go into competitive dance.
Yeah. So there's a ton of, if you just want to learn social dancing, there's a ton of places to do it. In particular, if you want to learn salsa, most salsa clubs or studios have like you get a free Friday night lesson with their dance night, and you can start there. There's a ton of So salsa is it's a little bit of a different beast than the ballroom dances because salsa has its own community. And so, but they're great. You should totally check them out. If you want to do a little bit more so you can do ballroom dancing and not compete, right? So there's social ballroom dancing. If you're on the East Coast, then there's a ton of stuff through MIT that's open to the public. On the West Coast, I'm new to the West Coast, so I don't actually know much about the ballroom scene here on the West Coast. But you can totally, there's some like Fred Astaire dance studios, there's Arthur Murray dance studios, there's private dance studios. I always suggest going to private studios before you go to a franchise studio. But there are definitely a ton of opportunities. If you want to compete, it's the same thing, honestly. You just get in and go to a studio, and yeah, if you want links, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
For sure. And if we find something, we can also put in the description for the video.
It's very location dependent. So but if
Sure.
you Google like ballroom dancing and then your city, I'm sure you can find it pretty easily.
Nice. I guess two more things. First, any other crazy dance stories? Like, it doesn't have to be like involving you or in competition, or just something that stands out. I'm sure, like with like the years of stuff, there was like some pretty memorable moments.
Yeah. So the most memorable moment for me was competing at the national dance competition. This was back in 2017. It was the first time that I had danced at the national dance competition, and for some reason, I'm actually not clear why, but the national dance competition is held in Provo, Utah at the BYU, Brigham and Young University. And I'm really not clear why, but the Brigham and Young University has a fantastic ballroom dance company. And so if you're really serious about ballroom dancing and you are applying to college, definitely check them out. Anyway, so I've been competing for a long time at this point, and generally speaking, competitions are held in like college gyms or convention centers. And this was a legitimate stadium, like a basketball, I guess the basketball arena, right?
Wow.
With a huge, I don't even know what it's called. This is how not sportsy I am. But it's the Jumbotron is what it's called, right? The thing in the middle with the huge TV.
Yeah.
So, and it's, thousands of people can sit in the stadium, and you just walk in, and the energy of this place is unreal. I can't even describe it. Same thing if you walk into like a huge soccer stadium, same feeling. There's just this energy in the air. And I remember feeling like everything that I have ever worked for in my entire life is leading up to this one moment. And I'm standing on the on deck area waiting to go onto the floor. And I just have this like well of emotion coming up. And I'm just like, I can't cry. I can't do it. Right? Like I'm about to have the biggest moment of my life. And I'm like breaking down. It was fine. We got out on the floor and we danced fine. And then your number. So the way that you know if you get called to the next round is your number gets posted, the big Jumbotron. And I remember every round, like our number kept getting called up there, and every time I would just like start hyperventilating because again, it's like you never know what the competition is like that year. You never like you could be off that day. There's a million things that can happen. Of course, all of the training that has gone into this one moment, and not only just the training, but things like I didn't drink for 3 months before nationals, or like I had to eat right all the time. Anyway, there's a lot of energy and frankly finances that go into this too. And so just that experience was probably the most unique and memorable experiences I think I've ever had. and maybe we'll ever have.
That's
So.
awesome. Well, I guess now we know why they do nationals at BYU.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
But that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only thing left is like, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about dance wise that you feel like you didn't get a chance to share yet?
I don't think so. Um, I don't know. Dancing for me was just incredibly fulfilling, and um, yeah, it was a great time in my life. I'm glad to be out. I think like I'm glad to be on the other side, just because I don't know. It's nice to have those memories. But yeah, it was fantastic.
Amazing. Well, spectacular, Sonia. Thank you so much for imparting all your dance knowledge to us. But it was like really nice to like learn about the competitive side of ballroom dancing, which I knew nothing about until now.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to have been here, and thanks for asking those questions. It was great to relive some of those moments that I hadn't thought about in a long time.
No, for sure. But yeah, thank you again for dropping by, and we will definitely post links for like places if we find them, maybe places in the Bay. But yeah, just thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.